Oop, it says we're live. And I think YouTube's not lying. So hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to the May live show for the Crusty Club. Today we're going to be talking about Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the next couple of books for the live show so you guys all have an idea of what we will be reading this month and then in July. So this month we are going to be reading Loveless by Alice Oseman, and this is a book about our main character Georgia, who goes to university and she wants to fall in love and find her person, but then she starts to realize that she may be asexual / aromantic, and she learns a lot of new things about herself while in university. Really excited for this one. I've heard varying things, both good and bad, so we'll see how it goes. Hopefully we have an interesting live show with this one. But yes, this is the June pick. And then we will be having our live show in July, I believe July 10th, but I will double check all of that. And of course, have it on the book club social. So you can check that out in the description. And then in July, we are reading The Echo Wife. And this one is sort of a science fiction thriller about a geneticist who clones his wife and then makes like the perfect version of her that's like nicer, better, kinder, all of that. And he cheats on his wife with the clone, and then he dies. And now his wife and the clone are like, what's going on? How did he die? And how can we get rid of his body? I don't know if they kill him, so we'll see what happens, because that would be really juicy. I know like almost nothing about this book, which I have been trying to keep it to what I know, like I just said. So we'll see how this one goes. And I don't know when the live show for this will be, but probably in August, early August. Yes, those are the two books for June and July. And now I'm going to go ahead and let both Tiffany and Breana introduce themselves and take the floor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Breana, otherwise known as milkyboos on the internet. This is my first Celeste Ng book, and I'm excited to talk about it with you guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany at readbytiffany on the internet, and this is also my first Celeste Ng book, so interesting time. Also, Chanel, this is the first time I'm ever hearing of The Echo Wife, and I'm just like, what?
I honestly, so I first heard it, I think, from Lala, and then I saw Joel like talking about it constantly because he had just hauled it, and I was like, wait, why does it sound so juicy? Why does it sound so juicy? So I'm really excited for that. Also, I forgot to say that I wanted both of you guys to tell us all about a recent 5-star read you had. That if you gave this book 5 stars, because I don't know what you gave this book, but if you did give this book 5 stars, skip it and pick a different one.
Oh my god, I was just like, I've been in the worst reading slump for like the longest time. So if you tell me like, what have you been reading? I'll just name a ton of webtoons and manga. Like yesterday, I literally stayed up because I was reading a manga. But my latest 5-star read has probably been The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali, which was a Subtle Asian Book Club book pick of the month last month, and it was really, really great. It's about it's about like a girl and a boy who meet in Tehran in like 1950s, but then before they have like their epic romance or before they're about to get married, the coup breaks out. So they are torn apart until they meet again, like throughout the book, many years later. And it's like one of those misconnection love stories, and it was really fantastic. Highly recommend.
Oh wow, that sounds so interesting.
My last 5-star read was The Mountain Sing by Nguyen Phan Huy Mai.
Oh, that's on my TBR.
Yeah, prepare tissues because you will cry. All I did was cry. Yeah, it's a historical fiction that takes place over the course of, I want to say, like 5 decades during the Vietnam War, and then it follows the Tran family, and it's just a peek into all of the women's lives in that family and how they endured through hardship and how family triumphs over everything, love, happiness. You find it with your loved ones. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, sweeping historical fiction if you are interested in that. Yeah, it's her first book in English as well, so it was very exciting.
It was so good.
Sorry. Go ahead, Tiffany.
I was gonna compare it to like Pachinko. If people liked Pachinko, they should definitely pick it up. And the author's like super, super kind.
Yeah, I watched the Subtle Asian Book Club. By the way, if you guys don't follow the Subtle Asian Book Club, you definitely should, because I was gonna say I watched the, I think, interview that you guys had with the author, or was it? I think it was the live show, the interview, but I didn't stay for the whole thing because I was like, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. But I literally was like, I feel like you guys pick such good historical fiction books. Like, it's so amazing. So I'm really excited to read that book. But I will talk about my most recent 5-star read. I just finished, and I was looking at my story graph, but I just finished I'll Be the One recently, and it was so good.
Oh,
It was so good. It's about this plus size girl who is trying to get into the world of K-pop and dancing and stuff like that. And so she goes into this competition, and it's just so interesting to see, like, people talk about how like bigger bodies are, you know, in the K-pop industry, and then watching it from the lens of a young adult novel. And then it was like so amazing. I don't even know where to start. That book was just so good. But yeah, if you haven't checked out any of the books that we all mentioned, you definitely should. But let's go ahead and get into talking about Everything I Never Told You. I'm going to give a little bit of a summary about this book first for everybody who has not read it and is still here. But if you have read the book, go ahead and leave a heart in the comments so I can see how many people have read and finished the book while I give a little summary. So, Everything I Never Told You follows this Chinese American family living in a small town in Ohio in the 1970s. And at the beginning of the book, we find out that their favorite daughter, Lydia, is dead. And so we follow the family as they are, you know, learning about why she died, how she died, and what led up to that. We're following them in the 70s. And then we are also following the mother and father, James and Marilyn, in the past when they met, as well as, you know, their story, their life stories when they were, you know, how they came to be the people they are and how they came to be a couple and then parents and so on and so forth. So I follow this family in different times, and we just see how everything spiraled into Lydia's death. And if you like the sound of that, then you will definitely like Celeste's books in general, because that's the type of thing that she always writes. And I was really interested by that. So that's obviously why this was picked. But yes, that's a little bit of a summary about this book.
That's a great summary.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really short. It's like 260 pages or something like that, which I was not expecting at all, but it's definitely, there's so much in there. Okay, so I see a ton of hearts. This is great. This is great. The first couple of questions that we're going to have are going to be probably spoiler free, but to be safe, I would recommend, if you have not read the book, this should be your moment to leave. Have a wonderful day. Go and read the book, and then come back and watch the live show. But let's get into our first question, which is, what were your overall thoughts and your ratings? Everyone in the comments, go ahead and add your ratings and also your general thoughts as well, while Tiffany and Breana share theirs. Anyone can go first.
Yeah, I was like, this is my first Celeste Ng book. I haven't read anything before. I don't dive into, I don't know where this was, I don't know if it's like historical fiction or literary fiction. I don't know where it
I feel like it's both.
Yeah. I don't dive into this genre as often, but I think I would give it probably like 3.5 or 4 stars. I liked it all a lot up until like the end when everything is revealed. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't, I guess, what I was expecting. So then it kind of fell a little flat for me. But I really do like her writing style throughout the book, and I enjoyed, not that I liked the characters like personally, but I found the characters also be very interesting. And I think with a lot of books where you get deep dive into multiple characters, there's always at least one character that I really don't care about, I'm not interested in. I think for this whole family, like every character who we got to dive into their past, into their psyche, I was very intrigued by why they became the way that they were. And I like how everything kind of together when you find out about the parents' history and how they, I mean, we're going to talk about this later, but about how they impart their traumas onto their children. I thought that was fantastically written. So.
It's my turn? Okay. I would say I gave the book, objectively, I think it's like a 4-star read, but just because I've been in a slump lately, I gave it like a 3, so like a 3.5-ish, same as Breana. I personally really enjoyed the times, like of the narration in the past. Also, I listened to this on audiobook, so maybe that's a different reading experience because I don't know. I just like I blame it on the slump. I've been in this phase where just like, you know, sometimes you really want to read a book, but this time I had to like force myself to like listen to the audiobook. So I like the scenes where we were like discussing Marilyn and what's his name, James.
Mhm.
Then when they were like at Harvard, them like getting married, her mom, all those things, more so than the scenes where we flash back to the present trying to uncover everything. And especially like with the ending, because that was so open-ended, I was a little taken aback. I thought we would have like a definitive, more of like a definitive answer. So it was a good book, but it's definitely out of my comfort zone in terms of genres I typically read. Because I would actually categorize this as like kind of thriller-y, and I don't really read thriller.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
I could see why you would say that because some of the elements of Lydia's death could have that type of vibe, especially if you don't read thrillers often. So I can definitely see why you would say that.
Yeah, I like
Cool.
didn't. Sorry, I went into the book like not knowing what the premise was at all,
Mhm.
and because we opened up with the death, I was like, okay, this is a thriller.
Yeah.
And because I also know that you like reading thrillers, so I was like, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I also gave the book 3.5 stars. When I first read it, it was a 3-star read. And then I thought a little bit more. And I was like, yeah, this is more of a 3.5. And I'm kind of similar to both of you guys, where I really loved, my favorite parts were seeing the past and seeing how James and Marilyn became a couple and seeing how the effects of their relationships with their parents snowballed into how they treated their children, especially James. Like, I thought that was so interesting, like his character. My issues were with the ending as well. And I have read Celeste Ng's other work. So I've read Little Fires Everywhere. And that is a much more open-ended type of ending. But this one, for some reason, it wasn't the same. I felt like there were a lot of things that should have been resolved, especially because a lot of the situations were dependent on Hannah explaining them, which I will get into later on with my questions. But I felt like a lot was dependent on Hannah solving what was going on. So I was like, the ending is not, there's something missing here. And so it was like a 3.5 star read for me. But yeah. And it looks like most people are also agreeing that it was like a 3.5, 4 stars. I did see a 5-star one, so that's really awesome. And another 5-star. Second Celeste. Okay. Yeah, her writing is really good. Her writing is just so interesting.
I think it's like a solid book, but it just comes down to personal preference.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this comment is so funny. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'm just reading the comments to see what everyone kind of thought. And I feel like people do not like James.
He started off so strong for me, and then like as you read more, you're just like, oh, Louisa, oh, all this happened.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
His character. Okay. I'm gonna ask my second question now because I feel like we need to get to the James question because I'm just what is okay. My next question is, what did you guys think about the irony of Marilyn kind of, because her mom was like, you'll go to Harvard and find a man to marry, and she was like, no, I'm going to be a doctor. So what did you think about the irony that like everything she was trying to not be is everything she became, even down to how she treated her children and the expectations she had for Lydia were literally identical in behavior to what her mom had for her. It was just like a completely different expectation, but the exact same behavior and mindset. So what did you guys think about that?
I thought it was really interesting. I remember that like when Marilyn leaves for like 2-ish months to go try to become a doctor, and like the promise that like if and when her mom comes back, she'll do everything that her mom asks, like no fighting, like whatever. I thought it was really interesting to include that part because it's essentially the opposite of what Marilyn did with her mom. She was like, no, I'm gonna marry, I'm gonna have an interracial marriage that you don't approve of, like I'm going to become a doctor, I'm not gonna learn how to cook, like blah blah blah. But then Lydia, because Marilyn had low-key abandoned Lydia a couple months with no explanation, that Lydia became the dutiful daughter that was her to be, and that ended up destroying their relationship. So like even though from like Marilyn's mom and how she treated Marilyn and Marilyn and how she treated Lydia is this way that both the doctors reacted others,
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling expectations, still ended up, even though completely opposite extremes, still ended up destroying their relationships. Was really interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Completely agree. I agree with Angelari's comment. Like, so much of this book could have just been solved with communication, which I guess is why the title is Everything I Never Told You. But I was just like, I get that, like, her life, that, like, her being pregnant with Nathan at first kind of just threw everything for a wrench and kind of like stifled her and put her on the path that her mother wanted. But with her having her dreams and everything, she should have known, coming from her mother, like, what she was doing to her own daughter. And yet I just thought it was like, I get it, you want to be a doctor, you want to go back to school, but so much of it could have been resolved if she just, like, communicated more with James and with her family instead of just, like, leaving them for 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of agree with you guys, and I also agree with the comment that Kim left. I feel like this book, the entire premise of the book is not like Lydia's death and like all of this. I feel like the entire whole, not the hair, like the whole, if I was to summarize this book in one way, I would just say this is a book that really represents the unfulfilled dreams of parents, because like Marilyn's mom had that whole, like, you need to be married, like you need to marry a rich guy from Harvard who's going to take care of you, and you need to have like money and stability, because I don't think Marilyn had her father in her life, because I don't remember him ever being mentioned. So her mom was like very focused on like, you need to get married and have this like nuclear family where you're, you know what I mean? And so she has that unfulfilled, dream of her mom on her, and then she takes her own unfulfilled dream of being a doctor onto her child, and was just so aggressive about it in the same way that her mom was. And I was like, how do you not see this? Like, how do you not see that you're literally doing exactly the same thing your mom did, but like a remix? Like, how do you know what I mean? So it was just so interesting.
Yeah, I feel like Marilyn completely misinterpreted what went wrong with her relationship with her mom.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the "I want you to become a housewife" part that was the problem. It was the "I don't care what you want, do what I want" part that was the problem. Like,
Yeah.
she thought that, oh, if I don't force my daughter to become a housewife and force her to become a doctor instead, it'll resolve all the traumas I have from my youth. And it's like completely misunderstood what the issue was with her relationship with her mom.
Yeah, and I feel like the miscommunication that happened with that was in Lydia being afraid that if she wasn't the perfect daughter, her mom would leave again. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's where that disconnect happened, because Marilyn was very much like, oh, I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. But she kind of slightly vocalized it, but not really like directly. But then Lydia was just always like, yes, I'll do anything you want. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I feel like a lot of the disconnection happened. So that's like so interesting. I'm pretty sure her father left her mother. Okay, yeah. See, yeah, I think so, because her mom was super like, you need to be
with
the
the whole
perfect
Betty
housewife.
Crocker book thing.
Oh, the book scene was so sad. I think the part that, and then how Marilyn like is crying over the book and then realizing how sad and kind of pathetic her mom's life was, as she had trained her whole life to become the perfect housewife, and then had a husband, and then eventually lived for like 8 years alone.
Yeah, it's really wild, because she really just became everything her mom was, but didn't realize it. So that's like so interesting. But yeah, Breana was right about that. Okay, so our next question is, so even before she was born, Hannah has been the glue in this family. Like, she's the whole reason why her mom came back in the first place. You remember, like, she went to figure out her school and went to pursue her school, and then she realizes she's pregnant and she comes home. So literally the entire book is just Hannah solving everyone's issues, but not being able to communicate the issues she's solving. You know what I mean? So what did you guys think about the purpose of Hannah's character?
I'd say Hannah's probably my favorite character. Tied with like Lydia, and then I like Nathan was like, sometimes I like them, sometimes I was just like, what are you doing? But with Hannah, I don't know, it was just so difficult, because like Lydia was so obviously the golden child, and then Nathan, you get to see on page how much like James was pressuring him. So with Hannah, it was just such a different, like, at times I felt like she just wasn't there, but she had so much of a unsaid burden on her.
Honestly, I'm biased, but youngest children are superior. As a daughter of three myself, the household can run without me. So I feel like I really thought it was interesting how both Nath and Lydia had these really, really difficult relational issues with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of their parents' focus, like the problem with Lydia was that her parents were too focused on her. And then with Nath, it was like that was focused on him.
Mm-hmm.
And with Hannah, I feel like, not that she was like this in between, because she still did the same type of attention that Lydia did, but that she could always see the bigger picture because she was watching these failing relationships happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that she would, like, I was like, not that she's like snooping, but that she would always be around to watch the events happen that like no one else wanted to talk about. It's like everything I never told you. Like they didn't tell Hannah anything, but Hannah would just see it happen. And I thought that was an interesting way of using her character to kind of be the one who's like, wait, like I think that actually like Jack's in love with me. They're like, I think that, yeah. So I really enjoyed Hannah as a character. I don't know if I have a favorite per se, but I think Hannah's the one and only character that I actually liked on a personal level. I felt really bad as a fifth grader.
Yeah, I saw this comment and I kind of really agree. So I feel like it's funny to me because you know how when people make those stereotypes about the middle child being the ignored one and like the youngest is always the most chaotic and they're like, oh, and then the oldest is always the most traumatized and then the middle child is like ignored. But I feel like in this family, the middle child being Lydia, like she got the most attention and then Hannah got like nothing. So it was really interesting to see how that stereotype was not, you know, in this family. And it could be because Lydia was like the golden child that they had all these expectations for because she was the most appealing to society because of her features. So her parents were like clutched onto that. And it makes me wonder if they would have been like that with Hannah if she had been the same way. You know what I mean? So I feel like I wonder if Celeste did that on purpose and kind of rewrote, but I'm like, I'm thinking too much into it. But I think that would be so interesting. So I really, really loved Hannah's character. I just wish that, especially in the ending, everything was not dependent on her solving things, you know?
How old is she again?
She's like in the 5th grade.
Like 11.
Yeah.
It was upsetting that she was the only one who had any sort of sense in this entire.
Yeah. And their parents were constantly wishing, this comment I love too, because their parents were constantly wishing for like another chance to do things. And I'm like, Hannah is right there. She's literally right there. Like, you guys just don't want to give her the love she deserves. She's right there, you know? So that just made me so sad. Okay. So let's talk about Marilyn and James and Lydia and Nathan and how both children were literally suffocated by their parents because they were both everything their parents were and weren't. And what did you guys think about that? Like the very suffocating feeling. Like, did it make you guys feel claustrophobic as well, or is it just me?
Yes.
No, I 100%. Because my mom's not like that at all. Like I have a very hands-off type of parent, like relationship with my mom, where she like was a tiger parent, I guess, like in middle school, but after that it was just like you do you can like figure things out on your own. So whenever I read those types of stereotypes in books, I guess, I'm always like, oh my god, this is so uncomfortable. And I also just like, I hate that it exists. But like, you also know where it comes from, I guess.
Yeah. I also feel similarly because whenever I read books with like immigrant parents and they're always like, you have to do this, like piano, blah, blah, blah. And I remember when I was younger and I literally remember going to play piano and I was so bad. Like my parents literally took me out of playing piano because I was that bad. Like I tried the piano, I tried the flute, I tried the trombone, I tried, what was the other one? I tried the clarinet. I tried everything and I had zero musical skill. And they were like, you know what? How about we just don't? How about we just take this out? And being like the first child and reading books with, you know, the immigrant parents who are like helicopter parents and realizing now that I'm like older, my relationship with my parents is so much like so different where they're like, hey, do what you want, be the right type of, I mean, they're still compared to non-immigrant parents, very, very strict. But I feel like when you read books like that with parents like that and you can't relate anymore, you can't relate to that extent, it's just so weird. And you're like, ugh,
so
I feel
weird.
awkward.
It's like whenever I read those books, I'm also kind of like just tired of reading that type of relationship in books. Like, not, this sounds so bad because it's like every story is valid for sure, but I think lately so many of the books I've read, it's just like it's either the children want to do something, like they want to do arts, which their parents don't approve of, or like they want to break out of their family mold. And I'm just like, I want something happier.
Yeah.
I do like, though, I feel like a lot of the time, I guess maybe it's because I do normally read young adult books, we always get the relationship from the child's point of view and never the But here, I remember the scene that like really bothered me, but also I think it bothered me more because I saw it from the parents' point of view, is when James and Nathan are at the pool and Nathan's trying to play Marco Polo with the other kids and they all get out of the
Oh my god, that made me so sad.
So upset, and they like called him a slur and they're like slur, like he can't find China.
That made me so sad.
I thought like maybe, I mean, what would in an ideal world, right? Like James would talk to him about how like he's maybe suffered the same type of racism and like they could have a moment where they could bond, but instead James like saw it as embarrassing and he was like embarrassed of his own son suffering from racism as if that's his fault. And then like it's, I don't know, that was particularly upsetting because it wasn't even just like, oh, if you just saw it from Nathan's point, it'd just be like, oh, my dad didn't say anything, like we went home. But knowing that James felt ashamed of his own son and humiliated, and then not wanting to tell Nathan to open his eyes because then Nathan would see that they were all pranking him, and then I don't know, it wasn't coming from a place of love, I feel like, where he didn't want to tell him that he was being pranked.
Yeah, it was like he was ashamed that was his child, and it makes me sad too because I moved to, I think he was like, wasn't he like 10 or something in that scene? Yeah. He was like around that age. So when I read that, I felt so sad because when I moved to the US, I think I was like 11 or something like that. And I remember coming here and like seeing people who looked so different from me. And like, of course, when I was younger, there were like so many slurs and things going on. And I was like, oh my God, I hate it here. I want to go back home. Like, I hated being here so much. And one thing that makes me like really sad about that scene is the parent witnessing that, because in my case, like my parents were never there. So like there was not that like, oh my God, they saw this and I'm so embarrassed and sad. And like, what are they thinking? Are they like, you know what I mean? But I remember now like talking about such things with my parents and seeing how heartbroken they are that things like that happened to me. That scene with Nathan made me so upset because I was like, your dad is literally right there and he just didn't do anything. And it's like, okay, I get it because he also has that experience. Like he has that experience of being an immigrant kid and being in a country where you are completely different and you stand out just by existing. But I felt like in that moment, like your child is literally hurting, like literally. And he doesn't even understand what it means. He doesn't even understand what it means when people are saying that to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think James just has it so ingrained in his head to just, because when I read that scene, it made me think back to the scene where he's teaching that lecture in college, that cowboy class.
Yeah.
And then like just like all the students like just like
left.
I don't know if they like
just
say
disappeared.
anything, but they just like leave. And then I was just and he just like keeps teaching as normal, which is like great on a professional standpoint, I guess. Well, actually debatable. But just like him just being so non-confrontational and then passing that on to like your actual child when they're experiencing something so horrendous too.
Yeah, I feel like that's the one thing. Oh my goodness. This book brought up so many memories because I remember when I was in high school and my teacher said something to me and I called him a racist and then I got detention. And I remember that and I was like, not me getting detention because I called you what you are. And so it's just crazy to me that like when you grow up, you know, in a family where you are taught to be non-confrontational about people being discriminatory towards you, it's very difficult to not take that on to your children because James's parents were very much non-confrontational about such things as well. And he bleeds that into his children. And then I feel like Nathan, as he got older, became more confrontational with his hatred of Jack. Like, and at the same time, he still did nothing. So like, you know what I mean? So it's just like this non-confrontational attitude, like going from the grandparents to the parents to the children. And I agree with you, Tiffany. Like, it's so sad to watch because it's like debatable that was professional, especially since afterwards he went and slept with a student. So the professionalism was questionable at all. So yeah. Not useless. I feel like he represented a lot of things in a lot of different ethnic groups that I definitely, because even though I'm not Chinese or Chinese American, I read those scenes with James, and I really, especially the scenes where he was, you know, like doing his test to prove he could be a student at the school, like I really related so much, because I don't know if you guys know this, but the way the US system is, like when you come from another country, they will literally do everything, they will do everything possible to demote you, like to be like you're not smart enough to be in the grade you're in. And I remember my mom having to fight for me to stay in the grade I was in, because they were like, well, you're coming from Africa, so we don't think you're smart enough. And like it was really like wild. So reading those scenes with James, I was like, pass the test, please. So yeah. Sad moment. But yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like we all have that like view of James's character. But what about Marilyn though? What do you guys think about Marilyn and her whole like wanting to stand out and be different vibes?
That was, I remember like the first time that was addressed, when she like kisses James after his class because he's Asian. Like,
right.
I was like, bitch, shut up. Not this.
Like, Breana, when I read that, I had to do a double back, because I was like, did she literally just say she kissed him because he was Asian?
Yeah, because she was like, oh, it's because he was so different and like stood out in a sea of all these like sandy haired white men. I'm like, okay, you didn't say it because he's Chinese, but like you said it.
But that's literally what you said. That was so awkward. Like,
yeah,
it was just so strange, because she was like, oh my God, here's somebody who's Asian and different from me, so I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna throw it back. Like, what? Girl, what?
Yeah,
that was just so strange.
The way they both like kind of fetishized each other. Like he was Marilyn because she was her honey hair that would glow amber after they made love. Like he was so obsessed with how she looked, and she was so obsessed with how he looked. And so slender, his slender neck. Like the way they just fetishized each other was like, I love the way that was written, and that's why I feel like I'll definitely read Celeste Ng's other works too, because the way she writes her characters, like they're so infuriating, but I see what they're thinking so fully. I can completely like see their thought process.
Not quirky girl. No, literally, because when the part where they like slept together, and then he was talking about the way their skin looked different, I was like, I feel so uncomfortable, because I was listening to the audiobook too, and I was like, I don't even know where to flip the page to, because like, what is going on? And it's so sad, and at the same time very interesting to think about how that is such a reality even in 2021. That is such a reality. Like, even if you go on like TikTok and stuff and you see interracial couples, some of them give off Marilyn and James vibes. So
like, yes, 100%.
So especially with the usernames, like some of them just give off that vibe. So I feel like it's so interesting that even though this book is set in the 70s, even though it was written in like 2014, it's literally the exact same situation with couples now. So I think that's so interesting and also terrifying, because then if those couples have children like this, like what is going to happen?
Yeah.
So
I forget that this book is set in the 70s, like throughout the book,
because it feels so like modern. It feels like it's happening right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, because exactly what you said, like the relationship dynamics, well, like mainly the relationship dynamics, it's just so universal, and I guess like still to this day a universal thing.
And also this comment is so interesting, because I thought about this at the end of the book too, because you know how like Marilyn and James were so focused on each other's like racial differences at the beginning of the book, and then when we get to that big fight they had where she said something and he's like, I knew it, you see me differently. Like, what do you what do you mean?
Kowtow to the police, and he was like, kowtow's a very harsh word toward like Asians, about like how you're also subservient. I remember that too, and he had like a whole spot. I mean, rightfully so. I mean, he probably like a moment of realization. But yeah, that wasn't mentioned as much after.
Yeah, like that scene, and I feel like that scene also to me symbolized like the fetishization of each other, and then the unwillingness to admit it because they were like, we're so obsessed, we're so obsessed. Now we're married and we should never talk about how weird that was because we just don't want to admit it. You know what I mean?
I agree with this comment so much.
I agree too. That's so interesting. This book was way too short for all the things that were in it. Like,
Right?
like how is this 260 pages? That's just wow. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Say what you want to say.
Oh, the scene between James and Marilyn that I feel like went unspoken about for the rest of the book was when James was. It's like I think around when Marilyn wants to like go back to school, and he's thinking. James thinks back to his parents about how his mom had also worked to make ends meet, and how her hands would be cracked, and she'd have to use lotion, and then how he felt ashamed that his was trying to seek like an internship with his coworker because he's like, I don't want people to think I'm not man enough. Like it came. The problem stemmed back down to his want to be considered the equal of like the other white men in society with their housewives. He was like, I don't want to be like, oh, like that guy from like born from immigrants who also have their wives work because they were like he wanted so badly to leave behind his past. And I thought that was also so interesting of like his own like not I don't want to say like classism per se. Obviously in that environment, so then there's trauma involved there, but the idea of like not like, being ashamed that his wife wants better for herself because he doesn't want people to look down on him specifically, not because he's threatened with success, but he's threatened with what other men will think of him if his wife has to work. It was so interesting, and I feel like for such a short book, so many little things where I was like, interesting.
I feel like even though I don't particularly like James's character, his character is just so important to look at and dissect because even down to his hair, the way he talked about the little piece of his hair sticking up all the time, like even that has so much symbolism. Like I just can't totally agree with this comment. Celeste has just such a scary way of creating such complex and intricate family dynamics that you're like, whoa, not this person's great cousin from the left side of the forest being the reason why they behave this way. Like, it's just like I can imagine what drafting a book looks like for her because like it's just a meme of that person that's connecting a bunch of lines together and they're trying to explain. She's like, here's the family line.
It sticks out. I feel like you're so like, oh my gosh, that does in fact make so much sense as to why this character is the way they are. Everything that's there is so informative. I feel like it has place.
I'm curious, is family, because I honestly don't know anything about Little Fires Everywhere, is this like a central theme that also plays into that book too?
Kind of. So Little Fires Everywhere is more it follows 3.5 families. So we have in Little Fires Everywhere, we have a single mom and her daughter who have just moved into the town. And then we have this nuclear perfect family that is spearheaded by a woman very similar to Marilyn, but also very different. She's like the picture perfect. We bake things every weekend, give it to our neighbors type. And then we have like her rich friends. And then we have I think she was Chinese. We have a Chinese immigrant woman who has just had a baby that she gave up. And that baby is the central of the entire story because one of the white families in the town has just found that baby and wants to adopt the baby. But the woman wants her child back. So the entire book is about a court case of the real mother or the birth mother actually wanting the child back. But the parents who want to adopt the child are like, we're her real parents. Like, and we've changed her name to an English name. It's very interesting because it has a lot of the dynamics that we see in this, but it's focused on a lot of different people. And I think it's really, really interesting. It's just as interesting as this, if not even more. So there's so many different things in that book as well, but it's a lot longer. So yeah, it's definitely, so someone did say, the mother of the baby is Chinese in Little Fires Everywhere. Yeah. And then, it's more about class dynamics and racism, whereas it's about like some other things as well. Yeah. But that's what that book is about. And it's really, really good. But okay. next question, because I'm super curious. What did you guys think about Louisa? James's student, assistant, TA thing. What did you think about that, and what happened after the funeral? Let's discuss.
My first impression was like, oh my god, not him, like history repeating itself with him and a student, I guess. But then before we hopped onto the live, like I think we all discussed like not him just like rejecting his culture, going for a white woman, and then flipping that back to going after someone who's Asian again.
Yeah, he's all like, oh, my first Oriental student. I was like,
dude, that made me, I was like, because I had to keep remembering that this book is in the 70s, because a lot of the things that people would say, and I feel like, obviously I was not born in the 70s.
No, I agree. Like, just like
maybe I'm looking a little fresh. I'm just kidding. Sorry to be going.
Just like the casual use of the word Oriental, I'm just like, who says that nowadays?
Right, because I feel like, especially in the US, I feel like a lot of people have discussed that word, even though you see it in a lot of places. Like you see it with food, you see it in a lot of places that you might enter. Like the word is still used, and I honestly didn't even know the history behind that word until very recently, because I had just seen it like everywhere. Because you go to a restaurant, the word is right there. You go to a grocery store, the word is right there. You know what I mean? So
wait, actually, I'm like the opposite of you, where like I like never heard of the word Oriental until college. Actually, like, well, I live in a predominantly Asian area in Los Angeles, so I like did not know what Oriental meant, and I didn't know it had that negative connotation. And then when someone first explained it to me, I was like, what does that mean? They're like, you can think of it as like someone stereotyping like an Asian rug, so like an Oriental rug. Mm-hmm. So whenever someone says Oriental, that's the first thing that comes into my head, like just a rug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely probably different if you grow up like in a different setting. But I remember like, and so when I read this book, I was like, can we say that? Can you say that? I was like, ah! And then I was like, wait, this is the 70s. But also, ah! I was like, oh, no. Like, you know, when you're reading a book and you just hear something that you know is just not allowed, especially like nowadays, and you just freeze and you're like,
that's inappropriate.
Like, let me get the heart rate back down. So like watching James and Louisa, going back to that, was just so awkward, because he had made this huge deal like out of being with a white woman, and then for him to then cheat on somebody who is from the exact same culture as his, and then for him to be like, maybe this is what I wanted the whole time. Like, how about we stop with the students and like let's find somebody that doesn't have, like, let's find somebody that we're not, you know, there's no power dynamic. Let's not even talk about age, but like there's no power. How about we just find somebody that we are on the same playing field with, outside of the fact that he's literally married. Like, you're literally married. Like, at least find somebody who is not, you know, like your subordinate. Yeah. Somebody who you're not paying their bills. You know what I mean? Like that. I was like, what is, and then for him to be like, I'm going for lunch. Like, you are not going for lunch. When Louisa was like, do you want to come for some lunch? I was immediately skeptical. I was like, lunch at your house? Y'all never heard of a restaurant? Like, I'm sure there are many. You could find a restaurant to eat at. So strange behavior. They didn't even eat a single thing. Also, Kim's comment is right on the money. Like, she is literally everything he rejected. Like, I feel like Louisa also, I might be remembering incorrectly, but she was pretty comfortable with who she was and like her heritage. Like, I don't remember her like shying away from the fact that she was Asian and being like shy and embarrassed the way James was. You know what I mean? Like, she was very much like, this is who I am. Like, I'm just here to be your TA and whatever. And then when they were in the car and she literally was like touching his arm, and Lydia was in the back being like, And she wasn't even, at that point, nothing was even going on. Like, James didn't even know anything was going on. He didn't even know Louisa had any type of feeling. But that whole thing, I feel like if I saw somebody do that type of thing around my father, I would probably bite them.
I'd be like, what's going on?
I'd be like, take your hand off of my father. So strange, Louisa. I saw somebody, I lost the comment, but I saw, oh yeah, here it is. Somebody said they felt sorry for Louisa, and I don't know that I feel, because she knew he was married, right? Like, because even when Marilyn showed up, she was like, oh my God, no, his wife, this is awkward. Like, she knew he was married, so I don't really feel bad for her.
Yeah, I feel like she's like my age-ish, right? Like 24, 23.
I think she's like 24 or 25.
I feel like if I were to go out and pursue a married man, that to myself. I mean, yes, he's also a dirtbag, but yeah. But,
right, this is true too. This part is so true.
These comments are so good. I was like, wow, your thoughts.
Less bad, James, less dry.
No, literally, James, this is my biggest issue with this character too, because even in the past, when I think he and Marilyn were not that far in age when they met, even then, like, I don't think he was that much older than her, but even then, there's still the power imbalance of her being his student, and then the fact that she dropped the class so they could continue being together after being so quickly, like, involved. Like, girl, you guys literally, like, I mean, I would still drop the class because that's awkward, but then to date him, like, I just feel like that was so weird. Like, that was just really strange. Like, the fact that you are only going after people who are like your students is so weird. So
no, I agree. Just like so much insecurity.
Wait, yes, this comment that Louisa like knew that his daughter just died.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's another reason why I don't.
That's why. Yeah, exactly.
Like, you knew you knew he had just come from a funeral, girl. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know? With his. Oh, I think so.
I don't remember.
But I don't really remember that clearly. Louisa was a little naive. Yeah. That was just, she was like, oh my God, what? The wife I knew existed showed up to my door. Oh no. Like, what? Like, why are you that shocked that his wife would find you? Like, especially, they live in a small town.
Yeah, 3,000 people.
Like, that is not even the size of a high school sometimes. So, like, how are you surprised that this woman showed up to your door and is like, where's my man? Like, she was acting so shocked, and that was just hilarious to me. But let's pivot a little bit into a character that we haven't really discussed that much. But let's talk about Jack and his whole deal with Nathan. What do you guys think about Jack's character? Because I want to know what you thought before I say what I thought.
The second that he was introduced, I think it was meant to paint him as like pretty bad, because like, oh, he just like is a playboy, blah blah blah. But for some reason, I was like, no. I want to like know more about him. Like, I think he's not as bad as he's meant to be initially. So I don't know, because I also really appreciate that he like was there for Lydia, even though like the impressions from the outside way, from like an outsider, was just like, why is he hitting on this girl? Like, it's just so sketch. But I don't know. He's like, I liked him more than I liked James and Marilyn. That's how I would put it.
I just want to write Jack Himbo King, which is hilarious.
Oh, where is it? Jack Himbo King. Yeah, like from the beginning, I kind of had a feeling that Jack was a misunderstood character, especially because when everybody was talking about how he was just like sleeping around and he was just like using all these girls, it didn't give that vibe based on how he was interacting with the characters. Like, somebody who has this really bad reputation, when he locks eyes with someone across the street, he's not gonna run away. Like, he's not just gonna bolt in the opposite direction. Like,
I was like, when I was reading, I was like, he doesn't seem like those stereotypical like Wattpad like playboy character.
Right. I was like, he literally, every time Nathan would look at Jack, he would literally run like his butt was on fire. So I was like, this dude is who you want me to believe is some evil mastermind? So I just knew that something was up, and I felt so bad for. And this is where the whole Hannah miscommunication thing comes in that upset me, because I felt like that could have just been so easily resolved with like, hey, I noticed this. Like she just kept being like, you're wrong, but why?
Why?
Can you just give us the tea? Can you just tell everyone right now? You know what I mean? But of course, also she's like a child, so she might not know how to navigate that discussion and how to be like, hey, I was eavesdropping and I heard this. You know what I mean?
I feel
So
like she grew up in a family with major communication issues.
mhm.
So I feel like I
Yeah.
understand her being 11 and also being bad at communicating, because who else was she supposed to be learning these skills from?
Yeah, exactly. That's my point too. Because like she just grew up in a family where people are not talking about anything, and then she's the youngest who's always forgotten. So in what moment is she gonna like demand everyone's attention and be like, "Hey, you guys need to listen to me because I'm right about this," you know? So it was just like a sad moment, but and then we find out that Jack is actually in love with Nathan, and then it was just like there, and that was it. And I was like, we
Because we
skipped a
saw it
couple
coming.
chapters.
We saw it
Yeah.
coming, but nothing happened. Like nothing comes out of it.
Right. So I feel like the buildup, because I did feel like there was sort of a buildup of that when he started hanging out with Lydia. I felt like that was coming. So for that to be like a whole buildup, and then for it to never be discussed between the two people that it was relevant to, just felt like we're missing something here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just an interesting thing to see. But then we get into the ending where we find out what happened with Lydia and how she died. So what did you guys think about that?
That was the part where I was like, oh, this is a 4, maybe a 4.5 star. And then when I got to that point and onwards, I was like, huh? Yeah, because I had mentioned this prior to us live, but I guess for the first like half of the book, I thought that
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, I forget about that.
that it's a 70. Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
on, Breana.
But I had mentioned that I thought that Nathan had just killed Lydia, because they had that scene where he, as children, pushed her into the lake because he was just upset that she kept getting all the attention, and then etc. But then I thought like that might be what happens at the end, and that he had killed her, but he had pushed like the trauma of that memory away and was so dead set on me and Jack instead. I thought that's what was going to happen, and I think it would have been satisfied with that, even if that seemed like a more obvious route because of that flashback. I think that would have been a fitting result for why she passed away, because her brother just had this really deep unresolved trauma and then made one mistake that's irreversible.
I would have liked that ending better, actually.
Not like, oh, he was about to murder her, but maybe it was just like a one moment of terrible decision, and then I think that would have added on to how complex the characters are. But then when it's just that she drowned by accident,
Yeah.
so anticlimactic.
Yeah,
that's how I would describe it too.
I wanted to bring up this comment really quickly because I think this is true, because I kept forgetting while reading this book that it was set in the 70s. And I think this is a really good point too, where I think a discussion, not even like I'm in love with you discussion, that's not what I'm talking about. The whole like I wasn't doing anything with your sister discussion is what I'm talking about. Because you remember when Nathan and Jack had talked, and then Jack was like, yeah, I did whatever with your sister. I feel like that admission was not really necessary, because it just added more hatred from Nathan's character. And then because we didn't get a discussion at the end, it felt like that whole thing was not even relevant. So that's what I meant. But that's very interesting. But yeah, about her death. Yeah. But Tiffany, did you want to share some thoughts?
I think that's how I described it. It was just like such a. I'm still confused too. Okay, I don't really like open-ended endings. So that it just felt so anticlimactic for me. Like if the book planned, like what's the word? Like happened the way that Breana talked about, like with Nathan actually like accidentally suppressing his memories. I think I would have enjoyed that ending a lot more. So it just felt so. I don't know. It just made me feel so much more like bad for Lydia too.
Yeah, I feel like the ending in general with Jack's storyline, like I understood he wasn't a part of the family. Well, I'm going to talk about Jack and Lydia. I understood he wasn't part of the family. I just felt like his storyline, because we had this intense buildup of his character in the whole book, that it just kind of led to not much in the grand scheme of things. And then that coupled with Lydia's reveal. I thought Lydia's reveal was really, really heartbreaking. And the entire time I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, what's going on? Really confused. Like I had to read it multiple times because I was like, is what I think is happening what is actually happening? And it was just so sad to see. So it was a sad moment. I don't know if it disappointed me with regards to Lydia's part of the ending. I know that like the conclusion with Nathan and Jack was not what I expected and kind of disappointing almost, but Lydia's part, I feel like it was a lot, and I'm like, I don't know if this is what I expected, but it's what I got. So
I agree with like the latest comment. Like, I don't know what would have been more sad, like if it was Lydia actually committing suicide versus the accidental death. Like both just felt so tragic to me.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I'm like, that's why I'm like, it's what I got, because what else? It was either going to be that she did it or it was an accident. It was going to be one of those two things, and either way, it's like, that's what we got. It was just so sad.
Yeah,
it was a sad moment. Yeah, right.
I don't think that's weird to say. I thought that's what the book was setting up, because it had moments of characters hitting or hurting other characters. Like when James got upset and slapped Nathan, when Nathan pushed Lydia. I thought that's what the book was setting up for, was that another character would inadvertently hurt another character, but in an irreversible way. So that's just why I thought it was going to be a murder, not that I thought it was a thriller. But yeah.
I thought it was a murder because I thought it was a thriller.
Yeah.
Well, no, because the entire time throughout the story, we see Nathan, like, in the part where they went swimming, and Nathan, like, didn't really, I think he, like, had Lydia underwater for some time, and then he helps her get out. So it kind of made it seem like he was the person who had killed her. And then later on, when Nathan is super suspicious about Jack, it's like, well, did Jack do it? And then when Marilyn is super frustrated, it's like, well, did she get upset and accidentally? Like, especially when she was, like, smelling Lydia's pillow. I was like, is this guilt?
Yeah.
I was like, did she do it? I mean, as somebody who always falls into the Hoopla thriller trap, every time I read something that's even a little suspicious, I'm like, is this murder? Like, what is this, you know? So, yeah, it was super, that's the part, like, it's just so heartbreaking, especially because she was scared of water and she can't swim. Like, that was just so traumatizing. Cruel irony for sure. Okay, so if anyone in the comments wants to share some final thoughts, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And then also we are going to discuss if we think that this book will ever be up for an adaptation, or if it would be a good adaptation. I know you guys haven't read or seen the Little Fires Everywhere TV show, but I feel like a lot of books, new and backlisted, are getting adaptations. So, like, do you see one with this, or what do you think?
I feel like I could see it being a short series and then it winning a bunch of Emmys or something like that. And
I can see it being a movie more than a series.
I guess it is short, but I feel like because of all the character dynamics, and I think it's more, I want to say it's more popular nowadays for things to become a mini series.
Like an 8-episode type of thing, and they end it there. Yeah.
That a lot of books are getting adapted into a series instead of movies.
I'm actually surprised it hasn't been adapted yet, actually.
Right. Like, I'm actually shocked because I feel like even though this book is so short, you could literally give each character an episode, and then you would have like 2 more episodes left, and you could just have that be like the last 50 pages of the book, and it would still make a really good miniseries. But then it would also make a really good movie because so many things are getting adapted, and I feel like this would be one where people would cry a lot. But I think it would benefit more as a series because each episode could focus on, like, for example, episode 1 is James's past and how we get to him meeting Marilyn at the end of episode 1, and then episode 2 is Marilyn's past and we end at her meeting James. Then episode 3, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, they could literally lay it out like that and have it be like 8 episodes and it would be done and finished. So I wonder. And
Not
I
me
hope.
thinking about 13 Reasons Why.
13 Reasons Why, I feel like should just never have been they could have, if they wanted to do something, they should have just had it be a movie and ended it there, because that show should have just stayed in the drafts. But that's just my opinion. It should have just stayed in the drafts. Okay, I love an adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does. That's why I feel like you constantly forget it was written in this. Well, it's set in the 70s, because it feels like all the things being discussed in this book are still being discussed now in 2021. So it would definitely be super relevant. Marilyn would definitely be Reese Witherspoon. She plays everything. She plays these characters so well. She knows how to play the type of character that would just make you so upset. So I think that should be on her. But do you guys want to share any final thoughts or anything that you want to share that you are currently working on for book clubs or for your channels or anything like that? Go ahead and take the floor.
If you guys are not yet a part of Magical Girl Society, you can join. It is a book and anime club that I run with my friend Monica from It's Monica Kid. And we have our live show for Sun by Rebecca Rodenhorst tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So it's on my socials, which is this, milkyboos. You'll find more info there. So Magical Society, great time. We read fantasy books with female characters centered or written by women. So yeah.
And if you are not part of Subtle Asian Book Club and you want to read more books by Asian authors, you should definitely check us out. We're at Subtle Asian Book Club on Instagram and at Subtle Asian Book on Twitter. But we mainly have our discussions on Discord, and it's a book club I run with Alexandra at Twirling Pages. And I think it was her birthday just passed. It just popped up in my brain. But the book we're reading this month is Dial A for Aunties, and that's also a book that's being adapted for, I think, either movie or I'm pretty sure it's a movie. So definitely make sure you check it out.
That literally just came out. That's amazing.
Yeah, we're really excited because the author is joining us for a live show on the 27th, I believe, the last Sunday of this month at 6 p.m. PST. So hope you can join.
And then if you guys want an easy way to find both Tiffany and Breana, I linked their socials, so Breana's YouTube channel and then Tiffany's Instagram, so you can find all of those things there. But since we have no last things to share and we've talked about all the comments here, I saw this. This was so funny. Yeah, Reese is she just does it well, and it's kind of scary. So we'll see if that ever happens. But thank you again to everyone for joining us. I'm trying to find the books that I talked about earlier. Thank you for joining us for today's live show. Don't forget that we are reading Loveless and then The Echo Wife for June and July. And I will see you all in the next live show. Thanks for being here. Goodbye.